All right. Hopefully our volume is okay. I will check it out before I send it. If I have to redo it, I will definitely redo it. So I'm going to walk through as quickly and efficiently as I can, setting up a course for this World Egg course specifically. A couple of things with it. And of course, I'm going to apologize for the camera here. It's a little bit bright in my office with my windows, so and we're not done painting yet. So aside from that, um, this course, we developed this with the other egg teachers that we have had um, up to this point. It's lined up with state standards. So we started with the World Egg Framework from the state of North Dakota, looking at those standards, looking at that content. Um, the tricky thing with it, as we've talked about, having the World Egg course as an online, there's not a lot of faith in the online world at this time with some people. Some people are very comfortable with it and it's very successful. The biggest thing gets to be giving it a run, seeing how it goes, and then continuing to make adjustments after the fact. Now, in this particular case, we have a very, very short time. We have a class that we need to make happen. This class has been fully vetted out with activities, resources, assignments, everything you need to do the course. So there shouldn't be anything that you have to do, but you reserve the right to make any adjustments, changes as you go. What we wanted to accomplish with this was to create a situation where there was no work for the instructor, because it is a bit of an additional piece sometimes. And the workload when you're not used to working in the online environment can be a little bit stressful at times. So we really wanted this to be something that would be a plug and play, with the thought that continued development on the course will happen over time. So really with this, this first go at it, um, read through the material, check out the assignments, check out the resources. I'm going to show you how to set it up in Edmodo specifically and how I would format that. Part of that comes back to there's a lot built into this course, specifically around the idea of it being in an online environment and trying to create something that is engaging for those students to be part of. It's obviously not going to be the same as having a course where students are sitting in front of you, where you have labs available. There's challenges to that. So you do have to look at a course differently than you would think about a course that you're going to teach in a face-to-face environment. The background in this, again, like I said, this was something that was developed using our state standards, our state frameworks, with the support of other egg teachers. Myself and my role, I am an instructional designer as well. So that is my background is in computer-based and online learning environments. So some of the things that are indicative to that environment are built into this course. So, again, it's to give the students an experience the best we can as a first run, but everything's always open to adjustments and further development. Again, we just wanted to create something that could be a plug and play to take some of that stress off of a new teacher. So without continuing to talk, you won't see my face so much anymore after this. I'm going to go to screen sharing and I'm going to start walking through how to set this course up, what some of the activities are, what an end assignment would look like, etc. So with that, let me move into my share screen here. And I am going to just choose my desktop if I can. Let's share the whole screen. All right, so you should be seeing my entire screen. Let me get rid of some stuff. So this is Edmodo right here. This is the LMS that you guys are using out at Central Cass. First thing that needs to really happen is an email needs to be sent out to the students. And again, I apologize. This is Saturday with our weather, everything that went on. Make sure if you have questions, shoot me another email. Give me a call. My number is 70. I better not put it on here because this might be a public video. I'll include my number in the email. So if you want to give me a call with any questions, we can also jump in a Zoom meeting like this sometime between now and Tuesday when you start with students. So you want to kick out an email to all of your students that are in the course, giving them this class code right here. So let me go grab an annotation tool, make it a little bit easier. At least I thought I grabbed the right one. Now I did. So right here, this class code, this is what you want to send to your students. Have them find Edmodo. And create a student account and then use this course code to enter the course. Everything that you do for those students needs to be delivered through this course. There's obviously going to be some email communication as well, but let your students know that they need to go to this course every day because this is your main mode of communication. There's going to definitely be some emails if we have some issues getting students logged in, different things like that. Contact Denise or myself. We can help get that stuff straightened out. There are most likely going to be some bumps as a person gets through that first week. Nice thing with this being an asynchronous course, the students are going to be able to kind of work on their own. If they miss a day or something, it shouldn't really all be that big of a deal. I'm also going to send you a couple of links to a crash course in teaching online that just has some basic information on how to use some of this stuff, some classroom strategies, some different things like that. So you can take a look at that when you have time, want to take a peek. It also gets into this video conferencing using this Zoom program, which is what I'm using to create this video. So this is a great program. We can do face-to-face meetings with it. We talked about it just a little bit last week when we met. Something that eventually, if you want to start to utilize, get some training on, let me know. I'll get that all set up for you. So send out that email to those students, get them into Edmodo, give them the link to Edmodo, give them this course code, have them get signed up into the course. Now, as far as putting information into the course, this works very much like social media. Most LMSs have kind of moved this direction. Not all of them, but a lot of them have, because that is the world that most of our students live in, is social media, unfortunately. So using this format, everything you see on this page is just going to post out in chronological order. So by the end of a course, this gets to be a lot of information. So my recommendation to anybody and everybody that ever does any type of online course is to have those units laid out. So in Edmodo, it's the use of these folders over here. So if I click on that, this takes me into folders. I've already set up for the unit 1. We're going to do another one. And set up unit 2. I'll give you one strategy. It's not the way you have to do it, but it is my recommendation to set everything up per unit. That way, if a student has a question, you can always just send an email, or if they post on there and ask the question, where do I go to find this? You can go to your unit folder. Otherwise, what ends up happening when you just put stuff into the feed and into the posts, they have to scroll back through so many of these posts to find information from earlier in the semester. So, using that folder system, using that unit structure. I can show you a quick example. Let me go here and open up, trying to remember where I have it saved at. So I'm going to show you an example of a professional development using a different learning management system. This one's set up in Google Classroom, but it'll give you an idea of what we set up and why we set it all up the way that we do. Of course, I am at home, so our system is not recognizing everything. Makes me go through a couple of extra steps here. All right, so this is my Google Classroom. This is the one that we use on the Fargo side. I also use Schoology. Um, my background training, I've built courses in most learning management systems, and they all function essentially the same way. They all have their graphic user interface that is, part of why they sell what they sell. So in here you see the same thing. We have this whole feed concept going on in Google Classroom. We go to our classwork, and this is where everything is set up by different units, and it does display the information from each of the units. So in this case, here's some basic information as to what we're trying to learn in the class, not something you have to have in yours at this time. But these are our topics or our units, type of assessment. These are different things that you do. Some of it's assignment, but there's a very, very consistent format to what this looks like. Having a consistent format just helps students navigate, makes them more comfortable in that environment when things are rolled out the same over and over and over and over again. Other courses that we've set up, MedTerm specifically, we've been teaching that one online now asynchronously for 5 years. That course is very, very much set up this way by our instructors. They share their information. They set their courses up all the same way. And that just gives us that consistent look from that learner standpoint. It's just a lot easier for them to navigate if they have that versus being in these streams in these different posts. So I'll get rid of that one, go back to Edmodo here. So I set one up already in this case, and I'll show you where the resources are at as we move forward. I'm going to add another folder. Got some other stuff that's popped up in here. You'll get used to that as you play through, since I'm not trying to train specifically on Edmodo right now. So I'm going to add another folder in this case, because this is going to be, let me get into the World Ag class here. I sent you this link that has the access to these courses, to this information. This document that says World Ag Instructional Map, this one is your go-to as far as being able to lay this course out. And again, this was created, not going to get too deep into the background of our curriculum documentation and our formatting, but we use consistent development process, a consistent file system that looks the same course to course to course with all the information that we need. So in this case, I have each one of the units laid out. You can take some time, go through, look at the information, look at the videos, and you can obviously add to any of this, but this is just a basis jumping off point. So the first unit I already set up was the food chain supply. You can see right here. You saw that folder in Edmodo. We'll go back there in a minute. Our second unit of study is going to be global trade. So looking at this entire course, just a quick synopsis of it. If we go back for a moment into our units of instruction and pacing, this document is what pulls in our framework from the state of North Dakota with the different standards that fall into these units, and the content that is dictated by the state as what's taught in these courses. So, the layout of this is going to be our food supply chain, global trade, economic impacts, sustainable agriculture, biotechnologies, production regions, land use, livestock, the global grocery bag, food security, careers, and technology trends. It was set up this way initially by the instructors. I guess I would maybe flop the careers and technology trends unit myself and do careers at the end, or maybe even do careers somewhere in the beginning. It's kind of a placeholder. Instructor comfort level where you would like to see that at. I definitely wouldn't feel bad about plugging things in different orders. But this was developed as we go through and look at it. Get rid of that document. Some of these units, the information in them, and the information that they need to complete some of the other pieces comes from prior instruction within the scope of the course. So later on, they'll be referring back sometimes to work that they've already done, that they need that information to be able to complete the work that they're doing now. So that scaffolding was intentionally looked at putting this course together. So back to Edmodo, we're going to set up this global trade in the folder system. So this is going to be unit 2. That is global trade. I'm not going to do any of that information there. It doesn't need to be done. We just need the unit name. So now I've got a folder for global trade. Now, again, we can see these are in the order you create them. So ideally, you would start at the bottom and move up through the units or backwards through the units, and that would keep them in that order. It is most likely possible to be able to change the order of these. I just have not yet modified date right there. That switches them around. So you can do that, but doing them in an order, front to back, back to front, whichever way, and then use this to sort that order. So now I've got global trade as my second unit. So now that I'm in this folder, I am going to add in here a Word document. And I believe I'm going to get this out of my way for a moment. I'll come back into it. I believe in the first one, I need to go back and peek quick if it'll let me. Let's go back to my post for a minute. See what I named that. Lesson plan. So I called it Unit 1 lesson plan. So when I'm back into my folders here, go back in my global trade folder. Let's get it back into that untitled document. So I'm going to call this one again, as far as naming it, I'm going to call it Unit 2 lesson plan, just for the sake of consistency. And again, as simple as that is, not everybody completely buys into it, but research shows over and over in these types of environments that consistent documentation, consistent format is indicative of the success of students in these environments. So I'm going to go back into my document around global trade, and I am literally just going to highlight everything that is part of that unit and copy that, take it back over here into my lesson plan document, if it'll let me. Computer's being a little funky at the moment. Always got to be something to throw us off. I'm going to paste that information in. And now I have everything, my links to information, everything that's part of that is right there, ready to go. So now that I have that done, it's all saved. I'm going to kick out of it. Now when I go back into my units, go back to my posts, I can see some of the information here, but I don't have a post yet. I've created the folder, but I haven't told them to do anything. So once I've uploaded that information, you can preload all of that information into those folders before you start rolling stuff out to students. That way it's all there. You don't have to do it as you go. You can do it as you go as well. That doesn't really matter. I think we talked about that a little bit, how much information you want students to see in a timely manner based on when you want things turned in, et cetera, et cetera. That obviously is your call as the instructor. My personal practice, I lay everything out from the beginning so they can see what's going on in the whole course. And then I roll out the assignments through the posts. So then in this case, I would go in, I can start a discussion, share class materials. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to give them some instructions. Leave the unit 2. And of course, I'm not making things as nice as I should. By this Friday. Just an example. So I'm just giving them their instructions here. Then I'm going to go and add from my library. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click on my Unit 2 Global Trade. I'm going to attach that to my post. So once that has been attached, which it should, I'm just going to double check here. I thought it showed up first. It's not right now. I'm going to go post and see if that happened. So for some reason, it could just be silly for me right now. So I'm going to go back and edit that post again. I don't know why. I bet it's because I didn't actually do the Word document. I tried to do the folder. So let me go back to my library. Let's go into that. Yeah, I forgot to select the lesson plan and then attach it to my post. So my bad. Now we know what my mistake was. Save that. So now my students know that I need to do this unit. This is when it needs to be done by. You can create drop boxes. I'm going to let you dig into all that stuff, not include all that in the video, because I'm assuming you're using this with your other courses as well. So now those students can just click on that link. It's going to then open up that Word document that has all of their instructions, hyperlinks to the resources, everything that they want to do. So that's the gist behind setting this up. Hopefully it's relatively simple. You don't have too many problems. Again, just get a hold of me if you're having trouble with something. If you want, you can send me your class code and I can join your class so I can see what's going on. That way I can help you troubleshoot things. I'd just be in there as a student and you'd ignore me as a student. So again, your prerogative, how you want to handle that. So that gets your units set up. Again, everything is meant to be plug and play. I'm just going to give you a little synopsis of what each of the units are, what the activities are, how they play out. So as we set this up, what we really intended with it was, for the most part, students are going to have the unit activities and lesson plans. Is to have a culminating project. So having them create a presentation using whatever you want to work with them on. This one's done in Google Slides, preferably something they can share with you. So that way, as you're going through and doing the grading, this is definitely a strategy I use quite a bit when I do an asynchronous course. I don't have them use the drop boxes and do the individual assignments. I'll have them do a culminating project like this where everything that they're doing gets plugged into that presentation. The intent at the end of this, it'll make a little more sense as I talk about the units and everything. The intent at the end of this is to have them narrate this presentation and turn in that narrated presentation and make that available to all the students. So as part of it, then those students would watch everybody else's presentation, so they would learn about all the different regions that are being studied. And I'll get a little deeper into that as we go. So as I open that up, you take a peek at this one. As an example, this isn't complete for the class. This is just to give a snapshot of what it could potentially look like. I focused on Northern Great Plains, specifically North Dakota, for my examples. And I'm pretty sure this one matches all of the units pretty close. I'm going through the first initial ones. But again, tweaks and tunes, what your expectation is, the instructor, that is all entirely up to you. If you don't want to use the presentation at all and you want them to do a different activity around each one of those units, absolutely. But this is something that they can share this with you. So you can always go back in and check that work on that due date. without having to necessarily go through drop boxes and turn in extra assignments. They turn in one assignment. That's the only thing that they have to turn in for the entire year theoretically, and everything they do is attached to this one assignment. Just makes it a little bit cleaner. But again, if a strategy you don't want to use, don't use it. Right, you'll just have to look at each unit then and what you want them to show you, show that they understand the content of that unit. So when we kind of just scroll through these slides quick, I've created it with a table of contents. In a real nerdy world, what I always end up doing is I link each one of these to the correct set of slides. Again, just way I tend to do things myself. I have some divider slides in here. So the first one on food supply, in that assignment, they're supposed to create a poster. I obviously just pulled an image from a Google search. Make sure that you have students go through and cite sources. I know getting into the real technical world of it, things aren't completely cited correctly throughout all my presentation. But typically within a presentation like this, as long as you have a link to the source information, that is acceptable. To be able to show where they got things from, so you know that they're doing the research, that they're pulling from credible sources. So you can have some of those kinds of conversations again as well, depending on what your intent is. So this just kind of first unit outlines what the food supply chain is, how that ties into some of the things in our state. So, Pride of Dakota has a lot of great information. Places that you would eat in North Dakota. I'd probably even include more information on maybe places that they source from, different things you can do with it. Again, just make sure you outline those specific expectations that may be a little bit different that you would have. So now we get into the global trade system. How do we fit into that system? So I used an infographic here to kind of show what that looks like. If I were doing this then at the end of the course for that document that needs to be turned in, they're going to be speaking over it and narrating it, and then they would talk about what's in this infograph. So getting into what do we grow in our region in North Dakota, where does it go? And these are all links. So as I was narrating it, I would follow the link that is on here as I was doing my narration. And I would talk about, well, where does food in North Dakota go? So now we talk about export boost in North Dakota, state agriculture and economy. So I could highlight this article a little bit, maybe some of the main points out of here. What are our top exports? Obviously being corn, wheat, canola, soybean. Those are our largest exports. So having them talk through and do this type of narration of that presentation, and then turning that in at the end of the year so everybody has an opportunity to take a look at different regions of the world. I'm just pulling this out because it makes it a little easier to get rid of it, because I have some other stuff up on my screen here that's covering things up. So that's kind of the intent, is to create that presentation that outlines the content of the course, to show their research, show their learning. So that's in this folder under unit activities and lesson plans. It's the culminating project. You can take this and plug the document into your LMS as an example. So you would just attach it to one of your posts so they could see that. If for some reason something doesn't work with sharing, they can't see it, anything like that, quick email to me, I'll fix that and make sure that they can. It should be set up that way. All right, so let's go back to Edmodo, or sorry, let's not go Edmodo. Let's talk about these units. So within the first unit, and food supply chain, the first thing it really has them doing is looking at what are the different regions of the world geographically. Because as you know, and students will find out too, that agricultural regions versus geographic regions are not the same thing. And so having them focus on a geographic region based on what their interest is. Maybe you have a student that is from another country. We have a lot of students that come from Africa. We have a lot of them from South America, Mexico, those areas. They may want to focus on an area that they are really from, if they came from there, or potentially an area that is culturally relevant to them. So, like my son right now is doing a project in geography at school where they're planning a trip somewhere, and he's planning a trip to Norway because our family, I'm very, 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 very Scandinavian, like ridiculously Scandinavian, and we know family over there. So he's been focusing on their region and where they live and planning, activities, travel, different things for their geography class. So because he has that tie to that region, that is of interest to him. We talk a lot about student choice, student agency, making things relevant to our students. So having them choose that geographic region, and this assignment has that piece in it, as well as looking at what the supply chain is. There's some videos, the activity, they're going to create a poster, whether they do that with colored pencils, whether they paint it, whether they do it with Photoshop, whether they do it with some other app on their phone. The intent isn't to teach programs in this course. The intent is for them to use the technology, the things they've learned in other places on how to communicate, and utilize those within the scope of this course. So I wouldn't necessarily stick students to certain programs to do activities for the most part, but let them choose which ones they're going to use that they're comfortable in, so that doesn't hinder the learning of the content. So that first one's really around that food supply chain. Where does it come from and how does it end up at the table for us? Second one being on global trade and looking at those impacts of global trade in those regions, as well as, it ties back to how it impacts us, but really the focus is on those regions. How does global trade impact those specific regions? So some of the information they get from that first part on, what are those main exports of their region that they look at in the food supply chain. And so then we tie into, how does that impact us from a standpoint of global trade? So in this particular one, we're having them look up a scholarly article on global trade and have them do an article review, obviously not to a professional level unless you want to go down that route. But there are some questions for them to look at as they review that article that come from scholarly review. So, again, we're trying to build writing skills, we're trying to build communication skills, a lot of different things into what we're doing, rolled into what these activities are. So then they would include some of that information as well as other things that they may find around how global trade impacts their particular region. So then we get into the economic impacts part of that. And those two sections can kind of tie in together a little bit, which is stated right here in the instructions. This section may be combined with the last unit on global trade, because the economic impacts obviously are part of what that global trade conversation is. But content-wise, we kind of separated them out. So they're really just looking at researching information around economic impacts. So there's some videos for them to watch. None of the videos in this are more than maybe 2 to 10 minute videos. They're all relatively short. The intent is to get them thinking about and kind of frame up what the content is and what they need to be looking for as they look at information from their region. So this is really just adding a piece around the economic impacts to their particular region. So if we go back and we look at our unit here, on the North Dakota side, I look at value-added agriculture. What are some of the impacts that are happening right now? Of course, we get into biotechnologies. Again, this presentation isn't fully developed to mirror absolutely everything. It's to give them ideas on how they could attack putting information into an end product. So looking at those global impacts, then we get into sustainable agriculture. This one is really formatted around Journey 2050. You'll want to go to that site, set up an account as a teacher, and it'll give you a code that you give to your students. So when the students go in, and this is a sim game, the students look at, I believe it's 3 different regions throughout the world, and they have to do everything from planting, watering, building more things into their farm. How do they sell their product? How do they impact the community? All the different pieces of what is sustainable agriculture. And then they do that at multiple levels. I think when I sat down and went through and played the game, it took me about 3-4 hours or so to go through that game, and then look at how to sustain, what are those sustainable practices, and then they would look at in their particular region what sustainable practices would they be looking at. So if you're in desert regions of Africa, water's going to be a big issue in the conversation. So what are sustainable practices? I talked with a gentleman here not too long ago, that was tied to an organization that is building um, aquaponics farms in third world countries so they can maximize the use of their water to grow both protein as well as vegetable mass, to help support their communities. So there's a sustainable agriculture practice that's trying to attack some of their limited resources and still create a consistent food supply. So, what is indicative to that, geographic region? What things would they potentially focus on? And then they'll put that into there. There's also some discussion pieces where you can just open up a discussion in your posts, and have students play out discussions on a discussion board and have that interaction that way. Because one of the things we want to do is try to figure out ways to have those students interact with each other. And again, here's an example through discussion. Some of those things are built into these as you go through them. Biotechnology, really within this one for the assignment, looked at focusing on the GMO piece of it, for a couple of different reasons. So the students have hot button topic. Me personally, I love hot button topics with students. You find out a lot about who they are and where their thinking comes from, and hopefully in the conversation you're able to change some of that thinking sometimes. Because as we know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Things become very political in nature. So as you'll see is in here quite a few times, do not attack others personally or belittle other opinions. That would be an instant failing grade as far as I'm concerned. If you want to take that out, you can take that out. But I included that in here because this is meant to get students thinking and have a little bit of debate and back that debate up with research. Because again, we know we can find good research and bad research. It allows us to have that conversation with students as well. So they just create a real short video using whatever technology they want. After they've watched these videos, they've done research on GMOs. They can take a look at and make this little PSA stating their position on the use of that particular biotechnology. Obviously, there's other things besides just GMOs, but it's a conversation that's out there really heavy. So that was the one that we focused on when we set this course up initially. And then as part of that, having that open discussion board, again, through a post on, after they've watched everybody's videos, let's have a little bit of conversation of it or around it. But do it in a way that we're asking questions and looking for response. So, example in here, it says, if we do not use GMOs, what are other ways that we can increase our food supply? So that way it gives people a chance to debate that information based off of their research and questioning, not necessarily personal opinion. But that'll play into it. So that's really what was developed around the biotechnology. So then we get into production regions, looking at Whittlesey's classification of agricultural regions, and how that obviously differs from necessarily geographic. So they would look at their geographic region and tie what that agricultural region is in that primary focus, and include some of that information, preferably with some sort of map um, that shows what region that their geographic region is part of, and giving information on what is specifically grown in there or raised in that region. That goes back to a prior unit as well that covered a little bit of that information. Unit 7's on land use. There's some different things, and again, in these videos, definitely I would say preview them before you throw the stuff out so you know what's there. Videos were specifically chosen in some of these to get them thinking about more than one avenue um, on what's happening, because obviously there are differences when you're talking about somebody that is in the business of I don't want to say conservation. What do I want to say? Um, yeah, people that are a little bit more pushed down the road of environmental protection come hell or high water, versus what's really happening and people who are in the field of agriculture and what they deal with. So we have those opposing views and some of that conflict, and that is intentionally built into some of this material to get them thinking about what are the different viewpoints. So there's some reading around this, and then they're going to talk about that sustainable land use. They've had that opportunity to play that game and look at what factors are out there as far as sustainability, and then tying that to what's happening in their regions a little more in depth. The livestock side of it, we definitely have students, especially in this online. We're reaching a group of students here that are not your typical rural America, small town. Good chunk of your kids are coming directly from a farm or have direct ties to agriculture. We have a lot of students that don't, which is also why some of this stuff is formatted the way it is. We're trying to give them a picture of what's happening within the world of agriculture. So this one has, again, some videos that talk about agriculture and what's happening out there. Whether we're talking more that organic, smaller, self-sustaining versus commercial, those things are in there. And then it pulls them into visiting some virtual farms. So these are different places that they can look at, a virtual setup of what's grown and different types of agriculture. The dairy one's kind of cool. It highlights a small farm versus a large, more commercial type operation, what those differences are. And so that gives them an idea of what they are. And then have them do some research on their regions, their type of livestock, food sources, how those things impact. There's a set of questions there. And in the activity, they'd create their own virtual farm for their region. Typically, that's going to be done using like your Google Slides or your PowerPoints, where they can include some pictures, maybe have some links to different information. They'll see some examples of how those are put together in these virtual farms. It's a little more in-depth assignment. But I think this is an area that you're going to find a lot of these students taking this course that are not from your rural, smaller communities. It gives them a real chance to explore the livestock end of the game. So then we get into the global grocery bag concept. What do people around the world eat? So we see what they are growing, what they are producing for livestock, what they have locally available. How does that impact what they're eating at the table? So as their activity in this, they're going to do some research around their region, geographical region, and look at creating a meal plan and a budget for what it would cost in that region to be able to have a meal based on what they produce and what they import, et cetera, in that region. Unit 10 is around food security, looking at, um, how are we going to feed the world? What are the things going on? So there's a couple of videos here about food security. Another one, revolutionizing the way we grow food. Starting to talk about some of those things that are different out there. The push towards the aquaponics or rooftop farms, or there's so much happening out there. So it really kind of ties to that. In this case, I had them create a futures wheel. So if they click on this link, it will take them to what a futures wheel is, which is just really a way to lay out, what's going on. It's just graphic mapping. And then what are different changes in sustainable practice, import export tied to economics, what things can be changed to positively impact food security in their particular region. Careers, yeah, we tie stuff back to Are You Ready ND all the time. The state really asks us to utilize that. I know they use it in other places. This is definitely one this is a real basic can. We use this over and over and over where they research a career they're interested in, present some information on it. You can obviously go any different route you want to do. This is just kind of an easy plug and play. It just takes a couple of days for them. It probably lacks a little bit on the interest from my standpoint, but um, it's a consistent thing that they're using with their counselors and planning. Ties directly to what they're looking at and what they're using in other places. Then the last unit on technology trends, I've got a couple of videos here, one on precision ag, one on hydroponic farming. Got some reading for them about some different things happening, and then they're going to dig into those trends and then take a look at, again, how can these things impact their region. So they're going to create an infographic like that map earlier. There's some examples. Just if you click on this, we'll give you examples of different infographics. And again, there can obviously be a lot more detail put into everything than what's here. This was just a basic framework of what this class would look like. And play out in a way that you can manage it as an instructor. It's probably one of the things people don't realize stepping into this, that managing it when you start to do things we would maybe do in a typical classroom where we have those kids right in front of us and we have resources right there. These kids might be sitting at home when they're doing this class. These students may be at their particular school at the time. This is an asynchronous course, so they might not be sitting in, one place or have the same type of access to information. So we tried to keep it so things are all accessible through web research, through their computer, because it is an online class. So that's kind of the gist of the entire course and what goes into it. And again, you are open to do whatever you want as far as enhancing these, but these are the units that need to be taught. The particular time frame is developed around the students having to spend plenty of their own time working. And again, you're not going to have them sitting in front of you every single day, probably never. We talk a little bit about that office hour concept. So some way they can get back to you, but they're doing this at their own pace. So it has to be manageable for them. It has to be manageable for you as well. So this is very specifically designed to have those activities that aren't just, I'm going to read a little bit of information, I'm going to take a quiz, test, whatever, then I'm going to move on. I'm going to read a little bit more. I don't know if you're familiar with the Nelson Ag products at all. North Dakota Center for Distance Ed uses them. They're very much read something, write something, take a test, move on, read something, write something, take a test, move on. We tried to bring in those pieces of making some videos, having some discussions, playing a game, doing some different activities, that it's just not going to be I'm going to read stuff and take tests about it and get my credit. Try to make it a little bit more engaging. So that is the gist of the course. I'm going to upload this onto YouTube and send you the link. And I'll send you the links as well for the online crash course that just has information on teaching in that online environment. So again, as you have any other questions, anything comes up, um, feel free to get a hold of me here. We can set up over the next couple of days if we want to do a video conference and talk some of it out so we can do some screen share and stuff. We can absolutely do that. I apologize, it's a little bit late with all the snow and everything going on with kids and family and yada yada. I got a little bit behind in the conversation. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this and I am going to stop the recording, and hopefully, as you keep moving forward and getting this all set up, anytime if you need some support, you need me to come out to Castleton, spend an hour or two in an afternoon, just let me know. I can definitely do that. So good luck. Look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully we can continue to develop these programs as we move forward.